Hey there, Waxahachie. This is Heidi Hood with the Waxahachie Chamber of Commerce. And we are live here with you tonight with Noelle from Discovery Point Retreat and a special guest for you today. We're going to be chatting once again about mental health and how we can support local businesses and our community in our recovery from COVID. So Noelle, would you take it from here?
Yes, so we want to welcome everyone to our substance use and mental health series. We have with us today Chris McGuire, and the reason I wanted to have him on the show is because, we talk about mental health, we talk about very heavy topics all the time, and I wanted to have a conversation about hope, a conversation about recovery, and boy, has Chris got a story for us. So sit back, batten down the hatches, and let's just jump right into the conversation. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey.
So Chris, you are now currently employed in terms of helping other people, and which is a wonderful thing and a huge part of recovery. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and your story?
Well, I am from Dallas. I don't know how I got the huge Texas accent from being from Dallas, but I have the big Texas accent.
Yes.
So that's how everybody knows me from nowadays. Back then, it was from drugs and selling and thinking I was going to be the next Pablo Escobar up here in Dallas.
So when was your first experience with drugs? Did you have addiction in your family?
I had more alcoholism in the family. It skipped right over to the drugs for me. You
didn't even mess with the alcohol. You went right for the hardcore stuff.
Oh, I messed with alcohol, but when I messed with alcohol, I used other substances because I didn't like hangovers. My first experience with drugs was pot back in high school. And I clearly remember it to this day that we all smoked before we went to a high school football game. And I thought, it was the thing to do to fit in with all the kids. And that was me. I always loved fitting in. But before the drugs and the alcohol even took place, the criminal behavior took place. The behaviors took place. I was stealing stuff from stores, and what I would steal from the stores, I would sell at school. So for the love of money and the criminal behavior started before the drugs.
So this is really interesting to me because, so are you trying to say there was like this love of danger that was there?
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
I guess I scared her.
It's okay. This happened before. Everybody stay tuned. She'll be back. Like this happens. It's funny. We'll have someone just drop off a broadcast and then we'll have them hop back. I'll give it a second here.
Okay.
But that was a really great question. And I'll just continue the dialogue if that's okay, Chris. Did you find that there was a love for danger, and what was it that kind of was the draw towards those behaviors for you?
Well, there's always been a love for danger to me. Nowadays, it's in a healthy way. But there not only was a love for danger, but there was a love for money. My mom didn't grow up wealthy or anything like that. There was many times where I saw her struggle as a single parent for me and my sister. And I think that kind of took place in my mind was like, one day I want to be able to help my mother. I want to be able to help my sister. I want to be able to do all of these things, but stealing is what started it out. And what I stole, I sold. It started out with pencils and bubble gum. And I would sell those at my middle school because everybody loves bubble gum and buys that in school. And then they were doing pencil break at that time. So I was like,
So what did you find was the direct, like what what was the tipping point, if you will, what just because it probably snowballed, right? Is that kind of how it happened? Was it was just
Well, it didn't snowball right away. The criminal behaviors, yes, I continued to smoke pot, but at that same time, the criminal behaviors took place of continuing to steal and to make money in different ways.
So they're connected.
They're connected. But see, at the same time, I played tennis. I played baseball. I had 5 tennis scholarships.
No way. I didn't know that.
And ever since I was a kid too, like one of my goals and dreams was to be in the military and be in the special forces. And it ran in my family. So I gave all of those scholarships and everything up for college to go into the Navy. Was in the Navy for 2 years, boot camp, did radar navigation school. Then from that, my job skill was linked with SEALs. So then I was supposed to go try out for them. And then that's when my knee started giving me problems. And then I ended up getting a medical discharge.
So let me stop you right there. So through all of this history that you're telling us, were you still doing the criminal behavior? Were you still doing the drugs at this point?
Not while I was in the military.
Okay. So there was a time where life looked hopeful. You were being productive. You really weren't leaning on addiction or the other behaviors that you described to get through, because you had a focus at that point.
At that point. But, like I said, I was telling her, during high school, there was things that there was the first time that I'd smoked pot before a football game. And I fell in love with pot then. I sold small amounts of pot in high school, probably to a lot of people that you wouldn't have thought would have smoked it. And then, went into the military, finally got the medical discharge, came home, was still getting paid by the military. Then I also had a full-time job, so I was getting paid with that. And I was seeing several of my friends that were still dabbling in small amounts of drugs, selling it.
So let me ask you a question, though, because I want to find this part out, which is, as a kid, we make excuses for kids all the time. Like if somebody were to say, he's just a kid, and, not to take those things too seriously. Like I realize in retrospect, you can see those as a real issue, but how do you tell the difference? Like now looking back, like, oh yeah, those were the red flags.
Well, I was good at hiding it for a long time from my mother until I just straight out came out open with what I was doing. I've always, in the AA big book, it talks about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You've got this one person that can put on this type of character, and then you have the opposite character, and that's me to a T. I can probably walk into a doctor's office and make you think I'm a doctor, but I'm not.
You're that good. Okay, so take us back to the story. So you've made it through you were saying your knee was hurting, and that was starting to give you trouble. And how do you make those connections? So what happened from there?
So from the Navy, I came home, and they call it home awaiting orders. So during that time, I was still getting paid on top of getting a full-time job of land surveying. So once the Navy had finally stopped paying me and actually gave me my medical discharge, I had saved all of that money. Now I'm sitting here watching my friends dabble in small-time stuff. So it's back to me in the behaviors of money and wanting to feel accepted. And so I start taking that money and investing it in the drugs. I remember the first time crossing the border down into Mexico, making the connection down there. And the first thing that they tell us is if we screw them over, that they will kill us. But that didn't scare me. I was okay with that because I had in my mind no intention of screwing anybody over. Mm-hmm. I'm a businessman. Why would I do that?
That's believe them at their word. So you were like, they're telling me the truth, so I believe them. I'm not going to do this thing they're threatening me for. Was it true? Were they being?
They were very true about it. And the next thing you know, we're snorting cocaine and everything with them, and eventually it was them bringing it across the border up here to Dallas at a very large quantity at a time, and that's when the money and the drugs and the party, and I fell in love with not just the money, but I fell in love with the drugs, the money, the whole lifestyle that comes with all of that. And once again, it boiled to self-esteem of wanting to be felt wanted and to be around people.
So it all comes back to self at the end of it. Yeah. And do you consider that trauma? Because the common thought is that under every addiction is trauma. So do you consider that was your self-esteem was linked with trauma in some way, or was it just it made you feel better about yourself?
It made me feel better about myself. I don't know necessarily if every single addiction issue is linked back to trauma. Now, a large majority of it is, but I don't think mine was linked back to trauma because I never had anything life-threatening or abused or anything like that. Like my mom raised me like a mother should.
So what was your relationship with your family at this point? Because, this sounds kind of like a wild life, Chris. Where's mom in all this?
So mom was my enabler. I could always go back to her place to hide out if I needed to. But I put her through a lot of issues that probably have caused trauma to her. And not only that, but I didn't talk to my father or sister for probably a good 4 or 5 years during this time period because they were so deathly afraid of me and who I was associated with. And I don't blame them. I can't blame them for that. They had to look after themselves. Right. It eventually, the first time around, I made the front page of the Dallas Morning News twice on how they weren't doing their job in catching me.
Nice.
And what that headline represented was eventually the drugs, the meth, is what I started switching into, took over my whole life. All my morals, all my values, everything that I was raised with went right out the door.
So describe for people at this point, because I have learned a lot about meth. And this stuff takes over everything, like you're saying. And there's a short window, right? So you're high for a certain amount of time. But then when you start coming down, you got to go find the meth again real fast. So it's not like you can't hold a job, you can't have relationships, you can't do anything except take meth, get the money, steal whatever you need to steal, get the meth again.
And that's what it boiled down to, was stealing from my own family. I robbed my aunt's house, and family was everything to me. But that's how bad the disease of addiction got to me, was I didn't care even if you were family. Yeah. I was going to do what I had to do to be able to eventually get that next fix. And I would justify it in my mind in different ways. Like, well, you don't like me, so I'm going to do this to you. Right.
And let me ask you, what about the compassion part of it? So there's all these different points of view about addiction. And so I'd love to get your take on this, because there are those people, and rightly so, who say, put him in jail. He is just a bad man. There's nothing good about him. And so it is stunning for me to sit here and talk to you, because I know you, and you're one of the most kind, generous, just amazing people that I know. And so to see you on the other side of addiction, how would you ask society to balance that, to see both sides of what a person could be? Because I'm so glad you're in recovery. I'm so glad I got to know you. And
you're probably glad that I'm in recovery.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be having a peaceful conversation, probably.
You wouldn't be nice to me right now.
They tried doing an intervention on me one time, and I wasn't hearing it. And what they said was, if I didn't stop what I was doing, that they were going to get the police involved. And I just started laughing. And I go, well, y'all are a little too late for that one, because I'm wanted right now.
Oh, my God.
But, for me, okay, so the first time around after the articles came out where I was hiding out at, it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was in the garage when SWAT, Dallas County Sheriff's, Mesquite Police Department, all that, opened that garage up with guns drawn on me.
And no way. Oh my gosh.
The sad part about this is I became content with knowing that either one day I was going to prison or one day I was going to get killed. That's not normal. But I made peace with that, because that's what I thought the rest of my life was going to be like. And I accepted that. That's not normal. And so eventually my court date dragged out for over a year. And my judge was Henry Wade Jr., long-term hardcore judge in Dallas. And I'm sitting here seeing him hand out 15, 20 years like it's nothing. And the whole time, I've been pulled over many of times with a lot of stuff in my car and got away with it. And so it boosted my ego. And my attorney the whole time was saying that I was going to get probation, because this was the first time that I'd ever been caught or in trouble. And so the day of court, he tells me the DA doesn't want to come down off my charge. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, they're trying to give you a 20-year sentence to set an example out of you. My first thought was, okay, well, I'm going to run again. What do I have to lose? If they're going to give me 20 years, that's the max. Right. And I'm literally on my way out of the courthouse, about to run, and I'm hearing my mom and them crying, and I turn around and I man up. So I have the trial. The DA, he was pushing for the 20-year sentence. And I don't know, thankfully the judge had saw something in me that day. He took into account me being in the military, took into account for, what I had done in my past as a good person. And he sentenced me to a thing called shock probation, where you go to prison as a scare tactic for 6 months and you get out and you're on probation instead of parole. I ended up doing 11 months down there. And the reason being is because of Hurricane Katrina hit, and they had to send all the buses to Louisiana to help them out. And when I got out, it took me 3 days to get right back into using, into selling. Stopped reporting, went on the run to New Orleans, came back, was hiding out at my mom's house, and I hear that knock. Halfway out of her apartment, she tells me it's the Boy Scouts at the door. And I stopped and I looked at her. She opens that door and looks at me and just starts just bawling. Needless to say, the Boy Scouts weren't selling cookies that day. No. They had handcuffs. And I get down to Lusteric, and I saw probation, and they're telling me that they're going to release me. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, Dallas County forgot the stipulations. Here, once again, I'm getting over on them. And I'm waiting on my name to get called out, and I never hear it get called. And I find out why, because it got back to that DA's desk. He remembered my name and who I was, and it was supposed to be an automatic 10-year sentence for me. And he pushed for that 10 years. Now, you get a lot of guys when you're locked up, and I found out about Safe Pete, Substance Abuse Felony Punishment Program. It's the prison system's treatment center. And I found out about that. But you get guys that would rather go do prison time and get out on parole because to them, it's a way of life, and that seems easier to them. To me, I'm a numbers and I'm a statistic guy, so I would rather go do something that's 6 months of hardcore and be out and be back on probation. So that was my strategy. Now, did I want to get clean and sober at that time? Absolutely not. But that was my strategy. I went to court asking for help, and I had the same judge again, Henry Wade Jr., and he sentenced me to Safe Pete, which, when I got back to my jail and when I eventually talked to my mom on the phone, that was something that was hardly ever seen by this judge because he hands out some heavy sentences.
So stop right there and tell our audience about Safe P some, because I know about Safe P. I've heard of it, and boy, does it have a reputation. Now, when you got that sentence, did you already know what you were expecting when you got there?
I know exactly what to expect. But see, before I got there, I had to go to two prison units before I even got to it just to get there. And this is kind of how everything started coming into play for me and me opening up my eyes. And at that second unit, because, I had a lot of hate towards God, a lot of anger. And you'll find that that's not uncommon with people that are coming into recovery. My mom always used to say that my son is dead. And
Talking about you?
Talking about me. And she was right. Everything about me, mentally, spiritually, physically, everything about me, even though I was alive, I was the walking dead. And in the AA Big Book, it talks about that we're reborn. And in order to be reborn, a part of you has to die. And when I thought about that, and I thought about what she used to say, she was absolutely right. I was not the son that she had raised. So I had this crazy dream about who I thought had snitched me out and knew I was hiding out at her house.
What do you mean dream? Like you were asleep and you had this dream? Oh,
I had
okay.
this dream. And I don't know what it was about that time. But for some odd reason, I had this dream about this, and I opened up a Bible that night, and to this day, I will never remember what page or anything in the Bible it was, but it talked about seeking forgiveness and not revenge. And I wrote my mom about that. So finally, when I get down to the Safe Pete unit, and I'm allowed to have my first visitation with her, that's when she told me when she had read that letter, that's when she had made her mind up to tell me that she was the one that turned me in, and that her plan was to go into the judge and see if they would send me to treatment. And I can remember to this day her looking me in the eyes and asking if I ever wanted to see her again. And that's when it really hit me what I was doing to her. And of course, I'm a mama's boy. I said, yes, I want to see you again. And
you consider that your rock bottom? Was that the moment?
That was part of my rock bottom. The second part is because I'm the last McGuire in the family, and when they pulled me into the chaplain's office one day and told me that my grandmother had passed away and I couldn't go home to her funeral, that's when it hit me that I will never hurt like that again, or anyone else will hurt like that again around me. The drugs, the money, the whole lifestyle that I fell in love with wasn't worth it to me in the end. I would rather be a part of my dad and my sister and my mom's and my aunts and all of them's lives again over any of that.
How did you not realize through all those years how disconnected you were from your family? And then was it the death that did it? Was it seeing your mom's face? I mean, for family to be so important, it took a long time for you to realize you've been without them for years.
Because I had so much hate and anger in me. I knew I was distant from them, but once again, I was a different person. And I had a lot of hate and anger in me. And I would blame them for all of that, even though it was my fault. And so when they had a family program out there at Safe Pete, and they were invited to the family program, and they learned about the D's of addiction, it changed their whole perspective on life and on me. And it helped make us all closer. And to this day, I still have the greatest relationship. I talk to my mom every day. I talk to my sister every day. Talk to my dad probably, I don't know, 2 times a week or so because he lives in Belize. But yeah, I was able to, so at one point I was able to make the amends with my aunt that I robbed her house on her 80th birthday. And when she passed away, I was able to attend that funeral. That was one of the most powerful parts in my recovery, because I was told I was never allowed to contact that side of the family again by the court system. And when they had reached out to me one day, and I told them that it's not that I never wanted to, I was told I couldn't, or else I face that possibility of being locked back up.
So you got all this healing from your family and all this support from your family. And after your whole history, that just must have meant the world, because, I know in recovery, you went through Safe P, which is the residential. Did you have to do time after that? Or after Safe P, were you done?
So from Safe P, you go to what we call down here is a halfway house. So I went to Salvation Army's halfway house. I did 90 days there, got a job, went to meetings, got a sponsor and all that kind of stuff. And then that's when I found out about sober living.
And you have a sober living now. So you own 2 sober livings, and you've dedicated your whole life now to helping others find recovery. So tell us a little bit about that, because that's part of your recovery, right?
So I've opened up 47, 48, 49 sober living homes total. So I've got my 2 men's houses, and then I've got the only LGBTQ sober living in Texas. Another organization I was with, I was over 190 sober livings before I left them and opened up 47 of those houses. So I
was just going to say, so for people who don't know what a sober living is exactly, sober living is for people in recovery where they can still have the support of others that are going through recovery. They haven't fully integrated back into society. Am I explaining this right, Chris?
It provides a safe, sober, supportive living environment. So a lot of times treatment is only 30, 60, 90 days. So you're just now healing a little bit. So that's where the sober living comes into play, is when people are leaving treatment, you have that accountability. You have that I call family, because when I moved into a sober living, it became a part of a family. So when I tell people when they move into my sober living homes that I want you to feel like you're a part of family. I don't want people to feel like this is just a place to crash or you've got a roommate or anything like that. Because I truly believe when you feel like you're a part of a family, your self-esteem goes up. And when your
And that's
self-esteem goes up, you stay clean and sober a little longer.
And that's what happened to you too. It's all about connection. So like when you felt that connection with your family again, it was so healing. And that's what you provide for other people. So in closing here, that we're at where I'm aware of the time, but I want to give you the last words in terms of if there's a young Chris McGuire out there, what would you say to him? What's the take-home message?
Is relapse does not have to be a part of your story. This is my first time in recovery. I've heard so many times that almost everybody in treatment will relapse. And I'm the type of person that when you tell me of something like that, I've got to prove you wrong. But what I do tell people is I have October 8, 2006 is my sobriety day. And what I do tell people is, yes, this is my first time in recovery. There's going to be times in recovery that are going to be difficult, and there's going to be times that are the best times of your life. But I'm no different than anybody else that has gone out many times. If I don't maintain my recovery, if I don't go to meetings, if I don't continue to help others, if I don't stay spiritually connected, I can go out just like that, like anybody else, and I can return to that lifestyle that I don't ever want to go back to. So it's possible if you want it, and you don't ever have to go back to it.
Chris, I think you're amazing. Your story is amazing, and the courage that it has taken to get here is mind-blowing, actually. Thank you so much for taking time to tell your story. And Heidi, thank you so much to you and to the Chamber for allowing us to chat with the audience for just a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris, thank you again for sharing your story. I think that's really awesome. And if anybody's listening tonight or watching tonight and you know someone, or maybe you are someone who needs help, Noelle and Chris, would you both share how they can get the help that they need?
Yes. Chris, you're with Discovery Point Retreat. Can you give us the contact?
469-412-4572.
And Discovery Point Retreat, we are here in Ellis County, in Waxahachie, and in Ennis. We offer all kinds of detox, residential, and outpatient services, not just for substance use, but also for mental health. So please don't hesitate to call.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.